Now that we have a primary star mask, we can actually start to do some things that are somewhat fun. What we need to do right now is to create a background-filled image, a background-filled star image. So I'm going to make a copy of this image. I'm going to go ahead and give it its new identifier, because this is the goal. So this is background-filled stars. To do this, then, we need to calculate local kind of backgrounds for every star. And we don't want the light of the stars as they appear now to influence that calculation. We're going to use the MultiMedium Transformation tool to do this process. So the first thing that Fabian does is that he takes the primary star mask, he applies it here, and he just right off the top just writes zeros using pixel math to all of those stars. Like that. Now and I'll just do this. And that works. And in some of the examples that I've done, it does work just fine. But in a really crowded field, when I was calculating the MMT values, I found that it kind of messed up the calculation because it was taking into account some of the black, and I found it didn't fill as well as I liked. So as a kind of a compromise, instead of filling with black, I tried this. Now you should try whichever you think. I'm not sure how critical it is, but I tried by filling with the median value of the image instead of with black. Shouldn't matter, we're going to fill this stuff anyway, but it does affect the calculation of what background value to put in these stars. So that's the thing that I put in there. Now don't be confused, this has nothing to do with getting rid of the stars, though, because they're just kind of gray blobs here. But do see now that you can see the stars that I was not capturing as part of the mask, or as part of the characterization that I did earlier to try to, through the star mask, identify as many as I can, but there's some left over. If I were to try to include all of these, it'd be a very, very even more crowded field. So we'll try to get rid of this once we've gotten rid of the stars in a proper way, perhaps again with some kind of noise reduction. So now we have just provisional color blotches for our stars in here. We need to fill these stars with again, a local calculation of what the background is near to the stars. And that changes, of course, depending upon where you are. So I'm going to put this to the side, and using our primary star mask, what we need to do is generate a set of different sizes for these stars, because we don't want to fill using, say, MMT with one scale. It is better to use large scales for large stars and small scales for small ones. So we're going to generate or derive a set of submasks that we're going to use from our primary star mask. But this is the root of all masks that we'll make now. So let's begin that process by looking here at what's kind of necessary to do. Before I do though, let me justify why you don't want to do this in one fell swoop. Fabian puts up this particular diagram which illustrates the point. If we did just one setting and not go through the different scale sizes for these stars, you'll see that you'll get under and over corrections as you fill the background here for stars. Notice how the stars here that are in this star's halo look very dark, and that won't be a good calculation of that local value here. Whereas here, when you do it iteratively, now we're getting a better approximation of what the background value is near to a bright star, or say in a nebulosity or things like that. So that's the justification instead of doing a single big fill, do it iteratively. So we need to generate a number of star masks. Now the stars that are in here, some of them are pretty big, like that one right there. That's pretty big. So I am going to, from this, use the morphological transformation tool to generate our different size stars using this particular mask, our primary mask. And I messed around a moment ago, and I determined that a size of 23 pixels here is enough to capture that plus all the other kind of biggish stars in here. So you want to use closing to do this. What it does is it takes this scale size, closes it, and if there's anything left over, it redilates that up to this scale. So you're going to get back what you originally had only if they are this big or larger. That's the idea. So watch what happens here when we apply the closing transformation to the image. Most of the small stars will disappear and we'll be left basically just with the larger stars, the larger structural bits of the image. Okay, so now right off the top I'm going to go ahead and rename this. I would rename this 23 pixels, but I can't start with a number with the identifier, so I'm going to call this underscore 23 underscore pix, because that makes sense to me. And this is our 23 pix version of that. Now we take the same, does everyone see the mistake I made? I'm going to go back a step here. Because I need to create a new image. I don't want to affect my star mask. So make a copy, and this thing is the one we do our closing on. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, you always want to keep your primary star mask. Don't clobber it. So this one we'll call underscore 23 underscore pix for pixels. Okay. Now we're going to do this. I'm just going to save this over here. And then we're going to do it again. But this time we are going to use a smaller element. Now how much smaller? Well, looking at these stars, I have this, a couple of big ones, right? And then if you look at how much this captured, it captured quite a few, including the big one. So I would say that we could probably go down significantly and still be okay with capturing everything in the image. So let's try going all the way to 15 here. Notice how I'm making this a structure element that is round. And again, we apply to a copy. Oh my goodness, I almost did it again. There. So this is what 15 looks like, and I'll go ahead and change the identifier name, but I hope you see what one of the issues is. Oh, this needs to be 15. This is including the 15 element things plus the previous one, right? Because everything that's bigger than 15 here is also, you can see the kind of big blobby star there, is also being included. So before we go anywhere, what we really need to do is take this image here and subtract the previous one, the 19. Here it is, the 19, or 23. Oh my goodness. Keep it straight, Adam. So we take our underscore 15 underscore pix minus the underscore 23 underscore pix. I need to take the difference of these two images so that we're only left with the 15 things. Now this one we do want to, replace the image. So these things are the 15 sized like things. And now we're okay here. And I think you can appreciate why I'm going to keep this. I'm going to keep this little formula handy, because we're going to need to subtract the next one as well, right? When we do the whatever size we might pick here. So what size should we pick now? Well, again, that seemed to have gotten, there's quite a few stars here. So why don't we go down again another another significant step. Why don't we go to 9? I usually like to do, I don't know, I haven't done that many, but of the ones I've done so far, I ended up with maybe 4 or 5 versions of these little iterative star sizes things. All right, so this is going to be 9. Make a copy. Oh my goodness. And then do it here. Let's change the name. And then we need to say _9 _pix minus the previous 2. Not that much. That. And this has to do with the fact that, you know, I generated these masks for the inner and the outer parts in a different way. So that's very interesting. That should do the job. And let's examine that. Let's see what we have left here. That's interesting that it's not a perfect subtraction there. So I think what we'll do is we'll just do the smallest element to clean up the rest of everything else. So we can either do 3 or 5. Let's just go for the smallest element here. Maybe we'll just stick with the 5. I'm afraid, though, it won't capture everything, and I want to make sure that we're not leaving anything behind. So maybe we'll just do like a little plus here. Okay. So this will be the smallest element. And again, make a copy here. Smallest elements, which is just about everything else, right? So all I need to do here, oh, I better change this name. This is _3 _6. Not even sure it matters, because I'm going to subtract, so that's going to leave me everything else, whatever the size is. Let's do _3 _pix. Oh, I put another underscore. Oh, okay. Yeah, and that should take care of anything else that's left over. So now we have 4 masks and our primary. So we begin with the largest stars. Let me remove the mask that's currently here. Begin with the largest stars. This is our 23. Put that mask in place. And then we use MMT to fill. Oh, not that M. That's MT. MMT. MultiMedium. There we go. For the very largest stars, we want a large area to sample here. So we want a very large number of layers. So we're only looking at the residual layer, and this is the size that we're interested in here. Let's show this. I should show the mask, right? Just so you can see. So these are the stars we're filling. We have a lot of room from star to star, so having a large scale here, it should work out just fine. So we go like this, and it's going to fill the estimate of the background here for each of these little stars at each location. And that's the result that we get. So let's remove this mask. And some of the stars, have they look like they've disappeared, right? They haven't actually disappeared, but they look like they have. Next, we have a 15 level here. So we apply our mask. I didn't do that right. Let's try again. There we go. And we fill again. Now maybe we only do 7 layers in this case instead of 8. So mask, remove this. Now we continue to move on. We've got 9. What's next? This is going to do another large majority of things. We'll do 6. Okay, there's 9 pixels. Remove the mask. And take up the rest of the stuff, the small stuff, with 3. Put this here. Obviously, we can use a smaller number of layers there. Okay, mask. Now, I think you can begin to see where we're heading, but let me just stress this. This is not, and I repeat, not the right answer. All we've done is we've put an approximation of the background, but you can see the halos of stars here, right? So there is going to be an over and under correction due to starlight and other issues because of this first calculation that we've made. What we really want to do is subtract the starlight from this image, then do this exact same thing we just did. But we need to isolate these halos first. And that's the next step, actually, is to subtract these halos out and then calculate what is a better approximation of the background to fill, and we'll fill exactly like we just did. So this is the background filled result, and we're starting to get to where we need to be, but we still have to do more work. The next step is to calculate the corrected star intensities, which is the difference between this image and the original, and then we can start to do the subtraction. Now what we have to create is the image that contains the corrected stellar intensities. And the good news is, it's pretty easy to do. We're going to be taking the difference between these two images. We're subtracting, rather, this background one from the original. And that's going to give us the corrected stars. Again, from our high-level discussion, we have the original. We created this thing with background-filled star areas. And when we take the difference, we're going to end up with corrected stars. That's what we're looking to do. So just bring out pixel math, and if you don't like to type, we can use the expression editor here and subtract from this image that background filled image. And we'll probably make it create a new image here, so we'll go ahead and do that. And there they are. These are the new stellar intensities. Let's try to get a sense of what it looks like here. I'm going to zoom. Oh, I'm not tracking there. I'm going to zoom in and show you that, yeah, we can see some nebula there, but just zooming into some stars, we have what looks like, almost like normal stars, and these are the creatures that we get to subtract from our data, and this will help us get rid of stellar halos and scattered light and stuff like that. So let's call this image something different. We're going to call this our BC stars, BC standing for background corrected stars, or something like that. And now we can subtract carefully, iteratively, these corrected stars from our original image. That is the idea. In fact, the first subtraction I'm going to do just straight up, and it's basically going to yield, give us right back our background filled example. And then we will blur this and subtract very, very minute amounts of light from these stars, the starlight, to remove some of those halos and things like that. So let's go ahead and just do that first subtraction. Let's see. Let me move this away. Using pixel math, we need to subtract our original minus our background corrected stars. And this time we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and do this right on the image itself. I could make a copy, but then the history won't be associated with a single image, so I'm going to do it all right on the real deal here. So there it is. So this image should look just exactly like the background corrected one. But now we get to do the fun thing. We are going to blur this a little bit and try to remove some of the halos around stars. Now if you look very closely here, you can see that stars have a little bit of a bright ring around them. Some of the brighter ones do anyway. The dimmer ones, I would say they blend in pretty good. So it's probably, in this case, there's a couple of things I can say. Number one, unlike, say, luminance data, which is going to have much more scattered bright light, here the amount of light that we're going to subtract is tiny, tiny amounts because this is H-alpha data. So I can tell you that the numbers are going to be very small. And then secondly, it really isn't so much an issue with the already subtracted smaller stars. It's really the big ones where we have something of some scattered light, that glow surrounding them. So those are the ones we're going to look at more, and that means it's going to be a larger kind of blurring of this corrected star image that we're going to be subtracting from here. But we did start with the first order subtraction, which is no blur at all. We do need to get convolution, the convolution process, so that we can start to blur the image. And I think we should begin perhaps with blurring the image on the level of, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 pixels here or so. And this is going to take care of, I hope, some of the, when we subtract, some of the brightness around some of these stars. Not this one, because that we need a greater blur, but around some of these other stars, it's only a few pixels away. So I have blurred the image. I think I did. I don't even remember if I did or not. Yes, and so we can now do the subtraction, but we won't subtract at the full amount. What we want to do is subtract some very small amount. Now I'm doing this for the first time, so I don't know the actual number, but I'm going to estimate probably 10%, 0.1. Let's see how far we get with using that. Now this time we're going to be replacing the target image. Now ignore the fact, I mean, you don't have to ignore it, but don't worry about the fact that the stars, the centers have become dark. That was expected. Remember, we're going to take our star masks and fill in a better approximation of the background, local background values here. That's the whole point. But I do think that that was probably an okay amount. I think it's kind of hard to argue, certainly with some of the smaller stars, that there is any glow surrounding them. Maybe you can see a little bit of something here. So perhaps we can do a little bit more of a blur. Maybe we'll go up to 6 or 8 or something along those lines. We blur our corrected star image. And this time I'm going to take half of what we had here. Let's see, is that 0.05? Because I want a very, very small amount. And then we do our subtraction. Now I think I've totally taken care of this, and that might even be too much. I don't know. Let's see. No, I think it's okay. I'm going to say that's okay. So I think that I've taken care of all stars up to about that level, because I just don't see anything surrounding the majority of stars. All we have left are these big ones. Now, with regards to the big ones, there are a few really bright ones in here that I just won't be able to handle, because they really fall into the category of those nonlinear type stars. And I'm going to save how to handle that for the next part, where I'll work on the luminance data. But let's just work on one like this, which I think we can handle. All we need to do is create a larger blur, and then blur our corrected image. You can see that by blurring, we've blurred so much now that all the small stuff, it's just not even having that much of an effect. At this scale, now we're really only looking at the very, very largest kind of radii. Technically, all stars have this going out to that radii, but you just can't detect it unless they're bright enough. So the question becomes, what level do we use here? Now, I'll try this, but I bet you even this is too much. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, that's too much. You can see how dark it became. We overly did it. So I'm going to add another 0 in here. Take 1/10 of that. And again, it's a very small number because I'm looking at H-alpha data here. Could you see the difference? It might be hard to tell in the recording. I went from here to here. Here to here. So I might do it one more time at this level. That might be too much. Maybe a little careful. So we'll do half of that. And then why don't we do another little bit more of a blur. And let's do a little more subtracting here. That might be, we need a little bit more because I couldn't see what happened. You can see I'm darkening, but I do think I almost need to go back to a slightly smaller radii here, which, technically I should be able to do, because this image we're subtracting from here, but I can always just go back in time using the History Explorer here to where it wasn't blurred quite as much. And then, of course, we should make sure that we're not going to overly subtract. So you can see there is some trial and error and adjustments to be made. All right, so that looks like the best that I'm going to be able to do. It didn't take care of, in this case, probably 3 stars. We have a really bright one here, this one here, and this one here. But all the other stars, I think it did a reasonable job. And this one is questionable, the one I was looking at, but it's pretty close. Really, most of that light is due to the diffraction, not so much the surrounding light of the star. So I think I can live with that. Now, having done all of that, we get to do the real fun part. So I'm going to close this, close this. This is where we get to fill in now with the sky values or the background values, local values here, that to the best of our abilities approximate what they should be in place of what used to be starlight there. So you start with the largest scales first. So we're going to start using our mask on the largest stars, or the largest things. Put the mask in place, but I'm going to, have it in place, but you can see how I fill it in using MMT. So we need our MultiMedium Transformation. One of the keys to making this work is to using, again, the right scale. You want to use larger scales for big things and smaller scales for small things, but also equally important, you want to use the smallest large scale you can. So use the smallest scale you can of the size that's necessary. The reason is because where there are variations in light, the smaller the scale is, the better it's going to approximate the answer. For example, some of these stars, like this one here that's in that tendril, boy, that one's going to be tough because it's a fairly large thing. And so I need to use a relatively large scale, but to the either side, there's kind of a darker area. So I suspect that this will become an undercorrected bit, unfortunately. But we'll just need to see what happens here. So let's try, I happen to have 7 layers here. So let's try 7 layers and see what happens. So you can see that as far as the sky is concerned, it did a fairly good job. There they are, there they go, there they are, there they go. I think my prediction was roughly right. You can see that here, and in some other places, slightly, like here, slightly undercorrected. And that has to do with the fact of the scale that we used. Now, if I go back, and I instead use a smaller scale like 6, it'll probably approximate that better. But if you look closely, it's not actually, the whole area doesn't have the same brightness profile, if you will. And that's because we're using a smaller scale. So what you can do, and you can also see in some of the other stars, like this one, see it didn't fully fill it with the local background intensity, and that's because our scale is too small. Now, that's why I use 7 instead of 6. Alternatively, you can run it twice at this scale and see if that does the trick. So running the MMT multiple times at the same scale might also give you a better result. No guarantee, though, and I'm waiting to see what happens. Okay, so there it is. I don't know if that was any better than a single iteration of the 7 layers rather than 2 of the 6. Well, let me just undo and redo. Well, but now I'm not going back far enough in time. I think that I like 1, 2. I'm going to put the 7 in place. I'll be right back. I'm going to compare. I don't know. But you get the idea of what you're looking for when you're making this assessment. Well, I've satisfied myself the one... Oh, notice how when I increased the 7 here, I didn't take away that. Hang on, I messed that up. Be sure that you're just looking at that residual layer. Okay, now I've satisfied myself that that one iteration at the 7 layers level, especially on the background, you know, where there are just stars, does a really fine job. And that's probably more important to me than the few little blips that aren't being corrected quite as well in the bright part of the nebula. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next scale. So that was the 23. Next we'll do the 15. So I have to remove this mask, put our 15 in place. Perhaps this time we'll go down to 5 or 6. Oh, I'll just try the 6 layer level. And fill it in. Okay. Then we, of course, go to our 9 layer. I've got to remove this mask. Put this mask in place. Fill. Now this is going to fill kind of in that, looks like mostly central area, but there's some scattered stuff there. So this time we'll lower it to 5. And then we have the remaining layer. Now I had 3 pixels here, but you know what? I am still totally freaked out about something and I want to try to fix it. Now, I'm not sure in my head if this works, but if you look closely at this image, I've got a lot of these little, I don't know what I did, a lot of these little blippy things around the edges here. And I think it's because of combining the 2 masks very, very early on. I got all these little tiny pixel-like things here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, because I think this works, but if it doesn't work, then I'll fix it in some other way. But using pixel math here, I'm going to take the primary mask. I'm going to use the, I don't want to type. And I'm going to subtract the all other masks from it, and whatever is left over, that's what I'm going to fill. That's all I want to do here. So the primary star mask is here, and then we're going to subtract the 23, and we're going to subtract the 19, or not 19, 15, and we're going to subtract the 9. And this thing we need to be a new image. Because it's my hope well, it got all of the little things, but let's see, I think I screwed something up because I still have a lot of, oh, I know what's going on. Yeah, I still have big things because of another error that I just made. Hang on, let me, okay, here it is, but I'm still not convinced it's going to take care of everything, so that's okay. Do the best I can. So I'll put this last mask in place here. And then, of course, we're going to fill with tiny, tiny number of layers. That's probably more than enough. Well, I'll keep it 3. That's fine. And let's fill it. Oh, it did work. Look at that. So here's the before, and you can see all my little weird things. And there's the after. So it got rid of, yeah, yay. Okay. So we're getting close. Let's close this for a moment. We have removed a majority of the stars. We have 3 or 4, which might be somewhat problematic. But there might be some creative ways of taking care of them. And, of course, we still have lots of little stars that I just didn't originally cover because they are so very nearly at the same level as the sky. I mean, we're only talking about so few number of counts. My suggestion is to make a star mask like I did earlier, but now it'll be easier for the star mask utility to kind of just capture all those little blippy stars and see if I can just kind of fill them based on their locations and then call that probably the best we can do. So let me see if I can create a star mask that will try to capture as many of these little blips. It probably won't be all of them, but as many of these little blips as I can. Okay, so let me just show you what I did. I created a full version image preview, but the thing about the preview is that let me show you the History Explorer here. I did a permanent stretch on it using HT, so I just did the automatic screen transfer function and then a permanent stretch. That way, when I make my mask, it's not going to include the nebula. It's just going to generate stars everywhere but the nebula, because I don't want a bunch of little things in the nebula itself. And how close does this come? Well, and these are the values, by the way, that I chose for mine. I just measured from this image the brightness of some of these dim stars, and I did a very small scale. So if you compare these two in the following way, let's see, if I go like this, put one over the other, and then blink. You can see, I mean, I'm not getting all of them, but I'm getting a healthy amount of them, I guess. So let's just try. I'm going to apply this mask here. And I could even do it on just the test, but I'm going to do it on the real deal. This will go on the real deal. I have good hope this is going to work. I don't know where MMT went right now. So let me open that up again. And certainly a very small scale for this application. Okay, so we went from here to here. I don't know, got rid of maybe half or something along those lines. And then I think the final thing to do is just some version of noise reduction that will further de-emphasize that background of very, very tiny stars. But I do think you can begin to see the nebulosity a little bit better here of the Dumbbell Nebula. Well, I've stared at this image now for some time, and I think I just have this feeling I'm not entirely satisfied with the little stars in the background. So I want to try to do one more step that will truly make this something closer to a starless image. What I've decided to do, a path forward I think will work, is to make this a nonlinear image. We've been working in the linear space for the entire time. So make this a nonlinear image, and I'll go ahead and employ the HDRMT. That'll compress the dynamic range, and it'll also, as was demonstrated earlier, kind of seed the image to have one more go around with a star mask, an appropriate star mask, to hopefully catch all those little guys. So first, let's go ahead, and I'm just going to use the automatic screen transfer function result here. So here's it is in that state. And then we'll just go nonlinear right from here. So put that here, and then there. So now we have this nonlinear image. And HDRMT, let's just go ahead and do it. For this image, I think either, I'm a big fan of the Gaussian, usually 5 or 7. I'm going to try 7 here. I'm not sure which is best. Let's see, what's my preview here? Oh, it's just, my preview's the whole image. Yeah, I was working on the whole image. So I'll just do it and see what happens here. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable result. So I think that's fine to give us that. And now we can try to generate a star mask to hopefully, and I'm going to use a different preview for this, to hopefully capture all those little itsy bitsy things. So I'm going to delete this one and make a new preview here. A preview that looks like that. And because I have now made this nonlinear, all of this stuff is not going to be included because I'm going to use a very small number of layers to try to identify those stars, but I don't want to do it on the whole image. It'll take me too much time to figure out how to just get all those stars. So we'll get the star mask up. And I did play around with this. Now let's see, but I just did it on a different version of this image. I needed to make this noise level, the threshold, very, very low in order to capture as many of these little blips as I possibly could. So I have a small number of the layers here for the scale, and I did bump up the small scale bit, the growth, so that that might help. Let's apply here, and you can kind of see the direction that I'm going. So you can see here that I'm really getting lots and lots of those small little stars. And I think that this level is just about what's necessary in order to make it work. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that, but I'm going to do it to the whole image. Let's do that. That's a lot of little blips, but again, I just think it's necessary. I also note that it does pick up on some of the diffraction spikes at this level, so that's kind of nice. I don't think it'll completely get rid of them, but it'll help. In fact, I'm going to help this mask out as well. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I have it enlarge and blur, so it enlarges, it dilates by like 1 pixel, slightly blurs it. So that's going to kind of help me as well. And I'll go ahead and apply this as a mask here. And then we'll need our MMT. I'm going to go ahead and use 4 or 5 here. 4 is probably better than 5. Let's try 4 and see what happens for number of layers. So basically the residual, though, is still what interests me. And we'll apply it here. Okay, well, looking at the result here of the 4 layers, with the residual being the last, I noticed that stars or groups of stars here, when I remove it, still show a little bit of a kind of a light there. It's too small a scale. I think we should at least go to 5, if not more, because I really want that to be basically like the sky. We're not worried so much about detail at this scale. So I'm going with 5. There we go. So here's before and after. We'll zoom out. So there's before and there's after. So I think that probably did a pretty good job of minimizing all those little itsy bitsy stars. And then, because now we're in a nonlinear place, what would also be nice to do is to somehow kind of blend our blotches with what remains of the sky. It's going to be another smoothing operation, but I think the point of all of this is really to show the very faint details. It's not so much the bright stuff, because that I can blend in separately or in a different way by a mask. So I'm going to use a TG, what's it called here? This one, TGV denoise. And once again, we'll need to mess around with the settings to try to find what is best here. So I use a preview and apply. Basically, what I need to do is determine what exponent is necessary. I didn't see anything happen there. And in fact, I need to take off the mask anyway. So let me take off the mask, sorry. And now let's apply that. And let's just make sure that nothing happened. Okay, still nothing happened. So we will... Let's try -5 and see what happens. Not a whole lot. Let's go to -3 and see what happens. Oh, well, there we have something. So -4. Let me see what -4 looks like. So it's somewhere between -3 and -4 is the answer. So the -3, maybe just lower this a little bit. And we can try to blend in some of these areas. Doesn't look too bad. Go down a little bit. For this kind of image, I'm going to go with something a little smoother, because this is the kind of thing that would be blended with other data. I wouldn't be using this image all on its own, very likely. So I'm going to apply this to the full thing. All right, and so here, I think, is basically the best I'm going to be able to do at this attempt at making a starless image. So what is probably the right thing to do, let me make some kind of adjustment here. We'll increase the contrast by making the sky a little darker. And we can probably brighten, not too much here, maybe a little more. A little darker. Maybe something around here. Now, I can pretty confidently say some of this stuff, like this bit here, this is certainly my amplifier glow, or something like that. And I'm pretty sure this is scattered light here from probably a bright star or related to the glow, I'm not sure. But I think all the other features look pretty solid to me. What I was very happy to see was this, there's kind of a loopy almost structure here. And if you look at Fabian's image, which is completely different telescope and all of that, he shows the similar kind of structure. So what might be nice to see, I'm going to back off on this just a little, is to see where we started and where we ended here. To show that, I'm going to go back, showing the history, all the way to the initial state. Let's make a copy of that image here. I'm going to minimize this thing. And then come back to where we were here. And let's display these things in the same way. All right, so this is where we began, and that's where we ended up. Not perfect, but certainly something that could be useful for blending purposes if you're blending hydrogen alpha, or this is hydrogen alpha, but it could be any of the narrowband stuff. And a number of other different kinds of ways to incorporate this data without the stars. Or you make different kinds of choices when applying the noise reduction and smoothing that I chose to do. If you don't do as much, then maybe the image can just stand on its own. I would say that this is a bit of a challenge because it has both bright stuff and dim stuff. If you have just a lot of dim stuff, and that's what was the case on my previous image that I was showing here. This is data that dealt with a part of this flaming skull nebula. The nebula was all about the same brightness. So at the end of the day, once you removed all the stars, it was easy just to smooth things a little bit and make it look good. But with data that looks like this, that wasn't quite as simple. However, I think at the end of the processing journey here, we've gotten to the point of creating a starless image.